I'm Adrienne Fuller, and today I'm sitting here with Lois Weinblatt, and we're talking about the equation for change. So, Lois, what is the equation for change?
So the equation was developed decades and decades ago, actually in the field of organizational dynamics. It was originally established when we're thinking about huge, massive scale change management in a corporation. But as you look at it, as you learn more about it, you realize this is an equation that applies to every change in our lives, whether it's big or small, personal or professional. This is really the equation that gets down to what does it take to really have a change take hold in a sustainable way.
What is the equation?
So the equation for change basically states that we have change on the one side and resistance on the other. So if you think about it kind of like seesaw, the idea is that if we have enough to tip the scales in favor of change, that change is going to take hold. If there's too much resistance, the change isn't going to take hold. So now that we kind of can have that visual of the seesaw, then the question is what tips the scales, and that's the variables in the middle. Those variables are D, V, and F. D stands for dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction obviously sounds kind of negative, but in this case, it's critical. It just means a gap between where you are and where you want to be. And so that's not a negative thing. That's actually an imperative piece of creating a change. So that's the D for dissatisfaction. Then we've got V, which stands for vision. And then we've got F, which is the first steps of action, how you're actually going to make that change happen. So when you put it all together, the idea is that change can really take hold when dissatisfaction multiplied by vision, multiplied by first steps of action are all greater than the resistance to that change. But since it's a multiplicative equation, if any of those three variables in the middle is a zero, it all zeroes out.
So, why is the equation for change such a key factor in visioning?
So it really, when you take a step back, the equation for change really is the visioning process itself. So you go into this process because there is a change that you want to make. And there's a compelling reason that you want to make that change now instead of 6 months from now or 2 years from now, right? So that's the C. Then you've got those three variables in the middle. The first is that dissatisfaction, the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Now, the visioning process, the first part of the visioning process really helps you truly understand where you are now and also where you want to be. And there's no way that you can truly gauge your level of dissatisfaction until you have both. And most people start to think about what do I want, but they don't actually gauge where they are now. And so they never can really get a complete understanding of how big that gap is. That's the first part of the visioning process, really gets down to that first variable. Now the V, the vision, obviously going through that visioning process gives value to that variable. Before it might have been a zero, and now you've got this vision, you've got this compelling definition of success at a specific point in the future. And then the F is those first steps of action, and that's the end of the visioning process. Now that you've created your vision, you've refined it, you finalized it, now you work backwards from that vision and create the roadmap to get there. So now you have your F. So you've got all three variables in the middle. And then the R, the resistance, there's been all this really interesting social science that shows how going through the visioning process, going through a process like this helps reduce the resistance to change in and of itself. So as you're going through the process, you're actually also reducing resistance to the change that you want to create just by going through the process itself.
You're becoming more open-minded to what your future might hold.
Exactly. And you're really understanding where you are at with each of those variables instead of just kind of flying blind and trying to throw a goal against the wall.
So, what if the resistance is too much to overcome?
The first step that I always take my clients through when they are hitting up against resistance is to take a step back and say, let's take a look at these variables. Which one or more of those variables in the center is a zero right now? Is there enough dissatisfaction? If we're really honest with ourselves, is the vision that compelling, right? Do you have an idea of what those first steps of action might be like? And even if you do have all those variables, like you said, is the resistance just too high? Is it like too much energy or too much time or too much effort or too many resources, whatever it might be? So the first step is just understanding which is the variable that is kind of zeroing everything out. And then it's also really understanding if that variable isn't there, if there just isn't that much dissatisfaction, does it make sense for us to focus on creating this change right now or not? Or does it make more sense for us to focus on a different change in our lives that we do have all the variables lined up for. And so typically what I'll say with the client is, let's focus on a change that you do have all those variables lined up for, so you can start to create some of that momentum, that kind of virtuous cycle of like, oh, I'm making this change happen that I wanted to make happen. And sometimes what happens is then you kind of create that momentum, you're getting that traction, and then you can finally go back to that other change that you've been wanting to create, and you find that the variables have shifted and now you have enough to tip the scales in favor of change. So it's identifying it and then also recognizing, do I want to try to put time and energy and effort and resources into sort of like a black hole? If something is zeroing it out, then it's just going to go into that zero and nothing's going to change and it's going to be really frustrating. Or is there a change that I really want to create that I can make happen that will be exciting and inspiring? And knowing, variables are always shifting, they're always in flux. And so doesn't mean that we're never going to be able to make that change by any means. It just means that we really want to be aware of, is the environment right now conducive to this specific change?
What is the moment in your life where you knew this is a moment where I need an inflection point and I need to pivot because I'm experiencing the equation for change right now?
I was in a relationship and I had the non-negotiables for a partner in my vision. I knew what they were, and I knew in my heart that that was not happening in that relationship. But we were living together and there were so many different things tied up in that. And I really wanted it to work. And I wanted that to be the guy in my vision. I really, really wanted to stick it out and have it be what I wanted it to be. And I knew, I absolutely knew that, again, if I look myself in the mirror, if I was honest with myself, there was no way that I could pretend that that was really the partner in my vision. And so it was a point where there was a ton of resistance. There was all those reasons why don't do it, or don't do it right now, or think about it a little longer, or whatever it might be. And I just absolutely felt those scales tipping, and that dissatisfaction was there. I definitely had the vision of what it was going to look like when not just with another person, but when I was single and able to really continue to pursue my vision on my own, not feeling kind of held back. And then the first steps of action, again, it was really tricky. There was a lot of logistics, but I wasn't going to let that hold me back. And it was just kind of gearing myself up for that. And then it came to the point where I just knew it was time. I could literally kind of physically feel those scales shifting in favor of change. And that was it.
You can hear it in your voice and you say,
Yeah.
I knew that wasn't going to hold me back.
Yeah.
Wasn't going to let that hold me back.
Yeah. I think a lot of times when I think about visioning, there's oftentimes I'll hear myself say, I'll kind of internally say, I refuse to feel like this anymore, or I refuse to continue to let this be my reality. Like, I just refuse. I'm just not gonna. I could totally live this out for the next 20 years and be fine. But I refuse to do that. And so when you get to that point of refusal,
A lot of people are doing that.
absolutely. And that's why a lot of people go through the visioning process and end up getting divorced. I mean, I don't have a percentage, so I don't want to say maybe a lot, but people go through the visioning process and they realize that it helps you be really honest with yourself. And you just get to that point where every step of the process is showing you right there in black and white what isn't in alignment, what's holding you back, what's not working. And at the end of it, it's like I can't pretend.
You can't ignore it anymore. And
Right.
know that there's something better out there for you that will make you feel more successful. And it takes time, but trusting yourself that you'll get through it to that point is the hardest part.
Absolutely. And that trust, I think the inner confidence is one of the most powerful byproducts of the visioning process. Is that I've even had somebody say to a client of mine, like, what happened? Like, there's just this new kind of inner quiet confidence about you. You've always, been a confident person, but there's something different. And it is just the sense of having that internal compass that no one can kind of take away from you. It's within you.
Yeah. You know what you really want.
Yeah. You have created your vision in such a way, you've written your vision in such a way that no one can take that away from you, or no one can bar you from making that happen. And so it's the sense of, where you want to go, you can sort of recalculate or recalibrate like a GPS helps you do, but also that there's literally no one who can sort of reach in and grab that. And it's within you. It's yours to keep and yours to have and yours to use for yourself as you move forward.
What else should people know about the equation for change?
It is like I could geek out on it forever. Once you know about the equation for change, you start to see it in all different areas of your life. And you also start to recognize places in your life where you're starting to get really frustrated with yourself that this isn't happening or that's not happening. And then you just kind of realize like, oh, I'm just actually not that dissatisfied with this. So like, why am I guilt tripping myself about letting the laundry pile up when like I have a huge laundry room and it piles up and I don't see it and I really don't care? Like, then that's fine. And then you can shift your energy to something where you really do have all those variables in place to make that change. So it's I can't tell you how many times I've written it on the back of a napkin with somebody or on the back of a receipt or jotted it down on a scrap sheet of paper and talked it over with somebody. But now that you have that in your back pocket, I mean, know that you can literally take a look at it for anything going on in your life and you're going to be able to gain insight like that.
Thank you, Lois.
Thank you, Adrienne.
Always just a fountain of wisdom.
Well, I could talk about the equation for change all day long and all of its applications, organizationally, personally, professionally, all of them. But I'm so glad that we got to dive into it and talk a little bit more today.
Thank you.
Thank you.